Hey guys, tonight, we drift gently through ancient whispers, where clouds shape-shift gods, bicker over mortals, and cows aren't just cows, they're divine metaphors on four legs. You're not exactly in danger, but let's just say that if you were a mortal woman in a myth, and Zeus noticed you, you'd better start packing your things. Quickly. The air is thick with incense, as you stand outside an old stone temple, somewhere between the edge of myth and memory. The sky rumbles not with thunder, but with a kind of celestial eye roll, because up on Mount Olympus, Hera, queen of the gods, is having another bad day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location, and the local time in the comments, too. Let's see who else is listening with you tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto the clouds, not a metaphor. Actual clouds, puffy, slightly damp, and swirling with divine gossip. Mount Olympus isn't as grand as you expect. It's cluttered with golden goblets, empty ambrosia plates, and a few half-finished lightning bolts lying around like old pizza boxes. In the middle of all this domestic divinity stands Hera, crown slightly askew, arms crossed. She's scanning the heavens with a glare that could curdle goat milk. Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage and family, an undisputed champion of suspicious wives everywhere, has a problem. And as always, that problem is named Zeus. Now let's pause for a moment. Hera gets a bad rap in modern retellings. People call her petty, jealous, overreacting. But imagine for a second, your husband is king of the gods, and yet his hobbies include seducing mortals, turning into animals to seduce mortals, and lying badly about seducing mortals. Wouldn't you be cranky too? Tonight's specific crankiness involves clouds, one in particular currently hovering somewhere over Argos. To the untrained eye, it's just a cloud, puffy, innocent, floating. But Hera knows better. See, Zeus has been unusually quiet lately, always a red flag. No dramatic storms, no shape-shifting, just silence. So Hera follows the quiet, and what does she find? A suspiciously isolated, overly fluffy cloud. It's just sitting there, trying very hard not to look suspicious. This cloud, dear listener, is not a cloud. Not really. Inside it is a mortal woman named Io. Yes, that's Io, like a Greek vowel moment, who was just minding her business as a priestess of Hera before Zeus accidentally showed up and complicated her life like an uninvited dinner guest. Zeus, panicking as he often does when caught mid-seduction, went with his classic move, turn the girl into a cloud, which is lazy even by immortal standards. Not a tree, not a dove, not even a flower, just a damp cumulonimbus with trust issues. Back to the scene. Hera floats, closer eyes narrowed. The cloud trembles, which, if you know anything about clouds, is not typical meteorological behavior. Zeus Hera says, voice calm in that specific, terrifying way. That means someone's about to lose a jawline. Why is that cloud twitching? Oh, that cloud. Zeus chuckles. Just weather. You know how it is. Moisture. Barometric something. Definitely not a mortal girl I just transformed. Historians still argue whether Zeus genuinely thought this would work, or if he was just buying time. Either way, Hera doesn't blink. She's already stepping forward, lifting one perfectly divine hand. The cloud tries to scoot backward, but it's no use. With a snap of her fingers, soft, musical, terrifying, Hera dissolves the mist. And there stands Io. Except she's not standing. She's on all fours, covered in white fur, blinking cow eyes. Yup, Hera didn't just reveal the mortal. She transformed her into a cow. It's honestly kind of impressive. A cloud-turned-girl-turned-cow in under a minute. That's multitasking. The cow formerly Io lets out a confused moo. Zeus clears his throat awkwardly. Hera smiles, not kindly. And you. You're still floating awkwardly in this mythic space, watching it unfold like a very niche soap opera. The air smells like lightning and hay. Mainstream scholars agree Io's story is one of the earliest and most vivid examples of divine jealousy in Greek myth, an entire saga spun from one poorly managed celestial crush. But there's a fringe theory whispered in the older corners of academia that Hera never really wanted to punish Io. She just wanted to humiliate Zeus. Io was the collateral cow. Whatever the reason, Hera now has a problem to solve. What do you do with a sacred bovine ex-priestess when you're done turning her into a quadruped? You assign her a bodyguard. But not just any bodyguard. You assign Argus. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, Io the cow is standing in a field just outside the temple she once prayed in. Her ears twitch. Her tail flicks. She has no idea what happens next. And you keep walking through myth, through moonlight, through a haze of bovine confusion, wondering what it would feel like to have your entire life derailed by divine drama and bad weather metaphors. But hey, welcome to Greek mythology. You probably won't survive this. You follow the soft clop of hooves through a temple courtyard where once incense burned and hymns rose to the heavens. Now the only sound is the nervous swishing of a cow's tail and the occasional very human-sounding sigh escaping those nostrils. Io, our unfortunate priestess, turned bovine nudges and overturned amphora with her nose. It smells faintly of oil and regret. Let's rewind a little before the cloud, before the moo. Io wasn't just any mortal. She was a priestess of Hera, yes, Hera, which makes this entire divine drama painfully awkward. Imagine pledging your life to a goddess praying to her daily, and then finding yourself seduced by her husband. It's like working for customer service and accidentally dating the CEO's spouse. No matter how innocent it was, HR is going to hear about it. Zeus, king of the gods, has always had a wandering eye and very questionable decision-making skills. When he spotted Io one day, walking along the banks of the Anachu's river, he was immediately enchanted, which in ancient Greek mythology is code for about to make this mortal's life very complicated. Now historians still argue whether Io was a willing participant, a reluctant target, or a completely unwilling pawn. Greek myths tend to gloss over consent, like it's a plot inconvenience, which tells you a lot about the priorities of the ancient world. Zeus, ever the romantic, likely didn't introduce himself like a normal being. No, he probably appeared as a ray of light or a dramatic gust of wind. Nothing says trust me like a talking breeze. However he arrived, it wasn't long before Io found herself caught between divine affection and divine politics. Because of course Hera noticed. Zeus, feeling the metaphorical heat before the literal thunderbolts panicked. What's his plan? Does he teleport Io to another country, give her a new identity, buy her a pair of winged sandals and an escape plan? Nope. He wraps her in a misty disguise like an ancient weather-themed throw blanket and leaves her sitting in a field. Genius. Which brings us back to that moment when Hera appears suspicious stylish and holding what must be the divine equivalent of receipts. You're there watching it unfold like a living fresco. Hera's eyes narrow. She sees through the cloud. With one small act of magic, she turns the girl into a cow. Not metaphorically. Literally. Now, imagine for a moment, 1 second you're a respected temple maiden, and the next, you're grazing nervously beside your old worship altar, trying not to moo every time your ex's wife walks by. There's no manual for this. Io, to her credit, handles it better than most would. She doesn't run, not at first. She simply lowers her head and flicks her ears, trying to process the absolute absurdity of it all. You follow her clumsy steps as she tries to leave the temple courtyard, but her hooves slip on the marble tiles. She pauses by a statue of Hera, her former patroness, whose stone face now seems to smirk just a little too knowingly. Some say this entire myth was meant to explain why sacred cattle were often found near Hera's temples. Others suggest it was a cautionary tale about loyalty or disloyalty, or maybe just bad decisions with sky gods. Whatever the meaning, Io's fate is sealed for now. Zeus, looking unusually sheepish, watches from a distance. He knows better than to intervene. When Hera gets that glint in her eye, the smart thing to do is wait, and maybe send in someone else to fix things later. That someone will be Hermes, but not yet. For now, Io is alone, except for you walking beside her, through long golden fields that shimmer under a half-divine sun. Her breath puffs out in small clouds. Not magical clouds, just the regular kind. Honest cow breath. She glances sideways at a water trough and sees her reflection. For a second she flinches. You would too. The ears, the snout, the wide bovine stare. It's all very disorienting. She tries to speak. What comes out is a low, confused mrr. You pat her shoulder. It's all right. No one gets out of a Greek myth with their dignity intact. As the day fades, Io settles on a patch of grass. You sit beside her back to a tree, eyes watching the clouds above. One of them looks like a lion, one like a goat, and one, that one looks like a woman trying very hard not to be seen. Old habits die hard, even in the sky. The sounds of the temple fade behind you. Crickets begin their evening song. Somewhere in the distance you think you hear footsteps, not human ones. Heavier, rhythmically deliberate, like someone with too many feet, or too many eyes. Argus is coming, but not yet. Let the cow rest. Let the breeze carry the scent of olives and pine. Let Io sleep beneath the stars for one peaceful night. Morning arrives with golden light slipping between olive branches, dappling the ground, where Io grazes in awkward silence. The dew is still clinging to the grass, and you swear you can hear her sigh with each bite, if cows can sigh, that is. Her tail flicks half-heartedly. It's going to be one of those days. You stretch bones, creaking slightly, as the world around you feels both ancient and oddly familiar. You've spent the night beside a divine bovine exile, which wasn't on your travel itinerary. But hey, Greek myths are more about emotional whiplash than sensible plot development. And now, Hera's got another idea. She's not satisfied with Io simply being a cow. No, that would be too merciful. Hera wants surveillance, and not the metaphorical kind. She wants Io watched, constantly, thoroughly, like the most overbearing security camera system in Olympus. Enter Argus Panoptes. You hear him before you see him. Heavy steps. No nonsense. The soft sound of eyes blinking not one, not two, but dozens. Argus is depending on your source, a giant, a monster, or a very exhausted security guard. What everyone agrees on is this: he has 100 eyes. Historians still argue whether Argus's eyes were evenly distributed like one of those cursed internet art AIs, or scattered randomly like a sentient Picasso painting. Either way, it's not a face you forget, and even when he blinks, some of the eyes remain open. Creepy. Yes. Effective, absolutely. You step back as Argus approaches, towering and silent. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence alone says, "You're being watched." He stands near Io, all patience and vigilance, the kind of guy who probably alphabetizes his weapons and still irons his tunic. Io backs away slightly, her ears twitching. There's no comfort in this new arrangement. She was a temple maiden, then a cloud, then a cow, and now she's under 24/7 surveillance by a walking optical illusion. You trail behind the pair as Argus leads Io away from the temple ruins, through the rolling hills of Argolis. The landscape is stunning, sunlit cliffs, wild herbs underfoot, the occasional startled shepherd, but the mood is anything but scenic. Io stumbles on the rocky path, glancing back at you, and you can almost read her expression. This can't get worse. Right. You've read Greek myths. It can. Argus doesn't talk much, but every so often one of his eyes swivels to look at you. It's not hostile exactly, just aware. And it's hard to sneak snacks when someone has 100 eyeballs, and none of them blink in sync. The ancient Greeks actually considered Argus a hero in his own right, before he got the side gig as Hera's personal bouncer. One version of his origin says he was so strong and tireless, he used to kill monsters just to stay busy. Kind of like someone who reorganizes their closet when anxious, except with more swordplay. But in this myth, he's reduced to a glorified babysitter. His job, make sure Io never gets a moment alone. Not to escape, not to think, and certainly not to be visited by anyone, especially a suspiciously sandal-wearing god with a flute problem. Spoiler alert, Hermes is warming up backstage. You sit beside Io in the evenings, under a sky that fades from mythic gold to sleepy indigo. She's still learning how to moo, and her communication is limited to occasional hoof scrapes and long, meaningful glances. You try not to make cow puns. She doesn't find them funny. The only comfort is that Argus, for all his surveillance, doesn't seem cruel. Just dutiful, unyielding. A guy with a job and zero interest in the drama behind it. He reminds you of those temple guards who never move even when tourists try to take selfies. Stoic, slightly tragic. One night, Io looks at you, really looks with all the desperation of someone who used to have a name and now just has hooves. You reach out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. There's nothing you can say to make it right. But at least she's not alone. And then, far in the distance, you hear the first faint notes of a flute. They're playful, casual, almost bored-sounding. But beneath that lazy tune is a quiet urgency, a whisper of rebellion. Hermes is coming. Argus doesn't react. Not yet, but a few of his eyes narrow, suspicious. You tuck closer to Io ears alert. Because when gods start playing music, somebody's about to fall asleep. Or worse. The moon slides up over the ridge. Io lowers her head, exhausted. You follow suit, curling up in the grass, using your bag as a pillow. Argus stands unmoving at the edge of the field, backlit by starlight. A scarecrow made of muscle marble, and far too many retinas. The air is calm for now, but change is already drifting on the wind, carried by melody, mischief, and winged sandals. You close your eyes, knowing that sleep is a luxury neither cow nor god can afford for long. The morning hums with that quiet tension that only happens in myth, when something is about to go terribly sideways, but no one has the energy to stop it. Io's hooves crunch softly over the hillside stones. Dew clings to her flanks. Her eyes look tired. And frankly, so do yours. You walk in silence alongside her, the grass brushing against your ankles, the distant bleat of goats sounding more judgmental than usual. Every few steps, Io pauses her head, tilting as if she half expects to see her reflection in the air. But there's no temple mirror now, only the uncomfortable truth of bovine existence. It's hard to say what's worse for her, the new legs, the tail, or the sudden downgrade in social status. One day, a respected priestess. The next, she's chewing cud beside a tree, while a 100-eyed security guard watches her like a hawk, if that hawk had 100 heads, and a clipboard. You can almost hear Hera's satisfaction from Mount Olympus, sipping whatever Olympians drink in the morning. Probably liquid smugness watching this unfold like her favorite reality show. Now let's be clear. Io is still sentient. Her thoughts remain sharp, her memory intact. She just doesn't have the right mouth parts anymore to express them. If you've ever had a dream where you're screaming and no sound comes out, congratulations, you're halfway to Io's daily vibe. She tries to communicate. First, she draws a crude shape in the dirt with her hoof a circle. You squint. A sun. No. She adds 2 short lines below. Legs. You nod slowly. Person. She nods enthusiastically. Then she moos. Soft. Prolonged. It echoes slightly down the hill. You're not sure what it means, but you try to affirm her with a thumbs up. She sighs again, which is impressive for someone without proper vocal cords. There's a myth variation less well known, where Io allegedly tries to write her name in the sand. Not exactly neat penmanship, given the whole hoof situation. Scholars have never agreed on whether this part of the story was literal or symbolic. Did she actually spell Io? Or was that the scribes, being cheeky historians, still argue over it? And you'd argue too, if you saw how many ancient inscriptions have been misread as grocery lists, but even without a name, she remembers who she was. That knowledge weighs heavily on her. You can feel it when she leans against your shoulder, in the cool morning shade, letting out a low, almost human-sounding breath. She wants her life back. And all she has is chewing grass and avoiding cow tipping from divine spectators. Then comes the buzzing. At first it's faint, like a fly too small to notice, but it builds, and Io stiffens. Her eyes widen. The buzz becomes a whine, a high-pitched drone that settles right between her ears. You wave your hands. Nothing there. But Io isn't imagining it, because Hera, still not satisfied with simply turning her rival into a ruminant and assigning a bodyguard, has now unleashed the divine cherry on top a gadfly. Not just any gadfly. A celestial-grade weaponized insect designed for maximum annoyance. Its stinger isn't deadly. It's worse. It's relentless. And it follows Io with the precision of a heat-seeking mosquito on espresso. Io bolts. She gallops wobbly, frantic down the hill, across a field past startled shepherds who drop their baskets in confusion. You run after her arms, flailing. Argus follows too, his eyes rotating like a horrifying disco ball. The fly zips, bites, zips again. Io bellows, her voice echoing with despair and pain, and the kind of panic reserved for people stuck in malfunctioning self-checkout lines. It's awful. But also in a deeply twisted way, this is Hera's idea of a message. Stay far away. I'm always watching. And also, I'm petty forever. The land blurs as you chase Io from one border to the next. She crashes through vineyards, splashes across creeks, and startles an entire flock of sacred geese. Somewhere along the way, you lose track of Argus. Maybe he's waiting. Maybe he's tired. Maybe he blinked. By dusk, Io finally stops. Not because she wants to, but because her legs give out. She collapses in a heap beside a grove of cypress trees' sides, heaving eyes wild. You fall beside her chest, burning. The gadfly mercifully seems to have vanished. Perhaps even divine insects need breaks. You both lie there stunned. And just above you, a flock of migrating birds flies overhead, black silhouettes slicing the sunset sky. You wonder if they have drama too. Probably not. Lucky birds. Io stares at them, then looks back at you. She tries to stand, but it's slow going. She's not built for this. None of you are. But somehow, tomorrow she'll walk again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Because Greek myths aren't known for their happy middles, just dramatic beginnings and extremely inconvenient journeys. You take a deep breath. The stars begin to blink awake, and from somewhere just beyond the horizon, a new sound, low, musical, measured, floats on the wind. It's Hermes again. The wind carries that unmistakable melody, lazy, but deliberate, light-footed, and amused with itself. It dances between olive branches and rolls down the hillside, where Io, still breathless from her gadfly-induced stampede, raises her head. Even in cow form, you can see something change in her. Recognition. Hope. Maybe just mild confusion. All valid responses when Hermes is involved. You sit up slowly. Your legs ache. Your dignity. Somewhere back at the vineyard, Io trampled. But as you lean into the breeze, the tune grows louder. A reed pipe, no question. The god of travelers, tricksters, and really good timing is on his way. Hermes doesn't arrive with a thunderclap or a celestial spotlight. That's Zeus's thing. No Hermes appears like he's been there the whole time, lounging casually on a rock legs, crossed chin in hand, and wearing sandals that look like they could sprout wings at any second. He smirks at you, winks at Io. Well, he says, voice smooth as olive oil on hot bread. Someone's been busy. Io groans softly. You assume it's frustration. Or relief. It's hard to tell with cow body language. Argus, however, is not amused. He emerges from the shadows behind the grove, looking just as menacing as ever. 100 eyes, and none of them blink. Not even the sleepy ones. He doesn't speak. He never does. But his posture says it all. Back off, messenger boy. I've got orders. Hermes stands brushing imaginary dust from his tunic. I know. You're just doing your job. He raises his hands in mock surrender. I'm just here for a chat, a quick lullaby. Then I'll be on my way. Argus narrows half his eyes. The other half keeps scanning the landscape. It's exhausting just to look at him. Hermes sits back down and begins to play again. The reed pipe's notes curl through the twilight like warm smoke. They're gentle, deliberate, oddly repetitive. You glance at Io. She's entranced. So are you. But Argus still standing, still watching. This might take a while. Now ancient sources vary on how Hermes managed to lull Argus to sleep. Some say he told stories. Others claim he invented the panpipes right then and there using reeds and beeswax and a bit of divine flair. One fringe account insists Hermes baked an impossibly boring pie and made Argus watch it cool for 6 hours. Probably not canon, but emotionally satisfying. What is consistent is this: Hermes doesn't rush. He's not a god of brute force. He's a god of rhythm, of pace, of wearing down resistance one note at a time. And so, for hours, he plays, sometimes stopping to comment on the weather, sometimes plucking at the grass, sometimes just humming. It's maddening, but also hypnotic. Argus starts to sway. One eye closes, then another. then 5, then 7. He shakes his head as if to wake himself. Hermes pauses, raises a brow, and starts again this time, softer, slower. You find yourself blinking, lulled by the rhythm, the repetition, the warm sound of myth itself getting sleepy. Then it happens. All 100 eyes close. The great guardian, Argus Panoptes, slayer of beasts, tireless watcher, Hera's ever-alert sentry, sits down slowly, then collapses, head against the stone, arms loose, eyes shut. He is asleep. Hermes doesn't waste a second. He rises, drawing a small, curved blade from beneath his cloak. It catches the moonlight for just an instant, then vanishes into shadow. You turn away. Even in a story like this, even with a god like Hermes, there's a moment when action becomes silence. One clean movement, one single breath, and Argus sleeps forever. Hermes wipes the blade on the grass and tucks it away. He deserved a better gig, he murmurs almost to himself. You nod. You agree. Even Io seems somber. For all his creepiness, Argus was loyal, dutiful, a little tragic. In another life, he might have been a friend. But there's no time for mourning. Hermes places a hand on Io's head. Come on, pretty girl. Let's get you out of here. With a wave of his hand, the rope around her neck. Yes, Argus tied her up 2 falls away. Hermes gives her a nudge. She hesitates, looks down at Argus, then back at you. Then she moves. You walk beside her under the darkening sky, with Hermes leading the way. He doesn't hum anymore. The mood has shifted. Light mischief has turned to quiet purpose. Back on Mount Olympus, Hera stirs. Something has changed. Something is missing. And soon her wrath will follow like a storm that's been waiting for permission. But for this moment, for just this night, you and Io are free. The stars scatter overhead like a careless spill of salt on dark velvet. You, Io, and Hermes move quietly through olive groves. The only sound your footsteps and the gentle rustle of wind in the leaves. There's a stillness here, temporary, fragile, and undeniably earned. Hermes walks ahead with that particular godly swagger, somewhere between dancer and cat burglar. You're pretty sure he's whistling, but it's so soft it might just be the air catching between his teeth. Either way, he seems almost too calm for someone who just assassinated a 100-eyed mythological bouncer. Io stays close, her hooves soft on the earth, her breath shallow. She keeps glancing behind toward the dark grove where Argus now rests. You wonder if she feels guilt or just relief. Hard to say. Being a cow doesn't come with an instruction manual for complicated emotions. As the trail narrows, Hermes stops. His eyes scan the moonlit horizon, then turn to you and Io. This is as far as I go, he says. I've got another errand in Delphi, and if I show up late again, the oracle starts predicting passive-aggressive riddles. He kneels, cups Io's jaw gently in his hand. I've done what I can. But Hera, she's not the forget-and-move-on type. He grins at you. Take care of her, will you? And just like that, Hermes vanishes. No sparkle, no sound. 1 second he's there, the next gone. Like he was never real at all. You and Io stand alone under the open sky. The wind changes direction. The scent of pine and something faintly sulphurous creeps in. Trouble, maybe. Memory, more likely. Because up on Olympus, Hera is learning what happened, and she is not pleased. You can feel it ripple across the land. A divine scowl vibrating through the mountains, making the birds tuck into their nests a little tighter. Hera doesn't scream. She doesn't throw vases. She plots. And when she plots, insects are involved. You hear the buzz before you see it. Not one. Dozens. The gadfly is back, with friends. They swarm over the hills like tiny, furious thunderclouds, wings whining like cursed flutes. Io panics. You do too. Running becomes instinct. You duck under branches, leap over rocks. Io barrels ahead, hooves pounding earth. She's faster than before fear tends to do that. The gadflies chase like guided missiles. They nip at her legs, sting her sides, zip under her tail. You try to swat them, but they dodge easily, focused only on torment. Hera has upgraded their firmware. These aren't ordinary insects. These are tactical strikes in a war of spite. Io screams a heart-wrenching half-moo cry that tears through the night. It echoes against the hills, bounces across the valleys. Somewhere, an owl flinches. You finally stumble into a shallow stream. Io charges in without hesitation. The water slows the flies, drowns a few, offers temporary mercy. You splash in beside her, panting, soaked. The flies hover on the bank, waiting. You sit there shivering while Io stands neck-deep in water, eyes darting. The moon catches on the ripples, casting long reflections of her that shimmer and dissolve with each breath. There's a fringe version of this myth that says the flies weren't real, that Hera simply cursed Io's mind, making her imagine the bites, the buzzing. A divine gaslight, but that theory doesn't hold much weight. The flies were too consistent, too cruel. Hera's pettiness doesn't need metaphors. It just stings. Eventually, the buzzing fades. The swarm, perhaps bored, disperses. Maybe Hera's watching through some divine mirror, satisfied for now. You help Io out of the stream. She's trembling, exhausted, but alive. You find shelter beneath a fig tree, the leaves large and fragrant. The ground is soft. Io curls beside you, her breath slow and heavy. You place a hand on her back, feeling the quiet thump of her heart. And for a moment you wonder why all this. Why does Hera torment Io? Why not just move on? Historians still argue about it. Some say Hera punished Io because she represented a betrayal too close to home. Io was her priestess after all. Others think Io was just an unfortunate stand-in, a mortal scapegoat in a divine marriage, crumbling under centuries of thunderbolt mismanagement. There's even a weird theory that Io and Hera were once aspects of the same goddess, split apart by evolving religions and patriarchal storytelling. If that's true, then Hera's rage isn't jealousy, it's self-loathing. Spicy stuff, but still debated over wine and olives at mythology conferences. Whatever the truth, Io is paying the price. And you're a witness to the long, cruel tale of divine insecurity. As you both drift into uneasy sleep beneath the fig tree, the stars above shimmer uncaring. The gods will do what the gods will do. But at least tonight, the flies are gone. Morning creaks into place, sluggish and hazy, as if Olympus itself had trouble waking up. The air hangs heavy with that odd kind of silence that follows a storm, though this one came not with thunder, but with wings and stingers. You sit up slowly beneath the fig tree muscles, stiff clothes still damp. Beside you, Io stirs. Her sides rise and fall in slow, uneven rhythm. Her hooves twitch in sleep. She's dreaming again. Probably not of greener pastures. You try not to move too fast, not to disturb her fragile peace. But the moment your shadow stretches past her nose, she blinks awake, then flinches. It's heartbreaking, that look of immediate fear. Even now, with the flies gone, and the stars replaced by birdsong, she braces for pain. You offer her a fig. She sniffs it suspiciously, then takes a bite, the tiniest nibble, as if checking for trickery. Today feels different, and not in the good way, because far, far above Hera is furious, not just irritated, not just in a snit, No, this is full, wrathful, scorned goddess fury. Argus is dead. Io has escaped. Zeus, that habitual thunderbolt dispenser and excuse generator, has once again failed to control his narrative. And Hera never lets things go. She walks the halls of Olympus in long, measured strides. Her gown trails sparks. The air around her smells faintly of ozone and judgment. In her hands, she carries a memory once shaped like an eye, still flickering with the last glimmer of Argus's consciousness. Because Hera may have lost her watcher, but she keeps his story alive. Literally. She takes Argus's 100 eyes, each one glowing softly with his last thoughts, and presses them into the tail of her sacred bird, the peacock. The bird squawks, once, then shudders. The eyes blink shimmer and settle. That's why even today peacocks carry those strange patterns on their feathers, each one an echo of Argus always watching. Mainstream historians chalk this myth up as an origin tale, a poetic explanation for bird plumage. But there's something eerie about it, isn't there? Hera didn't just honor Argus. She embedded him into beauty. She made memory decorative. That's power, and not the comforting kind. Back on Earth, you and Io begin moving again. Slowly, each step tentative. The road is dusty, winding through low hills and sleepy orchards. You pass by villages where people glance up, then quickly look away. No one wants to be seen acknowledging the cursed cow and her quiet companion. Somewhere along the path, Io stumbles. You catch her before she collapses completely, helping her rest under a fig-laden tree. She's thinner now, visibly worn. The constant fleeing, the terror, the isolation, it's all catching up. You sit beside her, unsure what to say. Maybe there's nothing left to say, only steps forward. She dozes again, and this time you let her. You stroke her back slow and steady, like brushing the air itself. Then you hear footsteps, measured, light, familiar. Zeus. He doesn't arrive in a thunderclap, not this time. He knows better. No one's in the mood for drama. Not after Argus. Not after the flies. He appears like a tired apology robe's rumpled beard, uncharacteristically uncombed. He doesn't speak at first, just looks at Io with something between guilt and awe. You can't tell whether you want to punch him or thank him. Probably both. Classic Zeus. Finally, he speaks. I didn't mean for this to happen. Of course he didn't. He never means for chaos. He just generates it. I tried to protect her. I thought the cloud would work. You raise an eyebrow. The cloud would work. As if hiding a priestess in a glorified mist was going to fool the most paranoid deity on the mountain. He kneels beside Io. She opens one eye, then closes it again. No trust left there. Only exhaustion. I can fix this. He says more to himself than anyone else. And you wonder, does he have the will, the power, or is he just going to hand this off to some other poor immortal? The fringe academic crowd sometimes floats the idea that Zeus wanted Io to suffer, not out of malice, but because the suffering would allow her to be elevated, transformed, remembered. That kind of divine math, where pain equals immortality, romanticized nonsense mostly. But gods play strange long games. Zeus stands and turns to you. Take her to Egypt, he says. There I'll meet you. There. She'll be safe. Egypt. A place of sun of stone temples and silent gods. A place Hera doesn't watch so closely. You nod. Because what else can you do? Zeus vanishes in a blink off to do whatever thunder gods do when they're trying to clean up their messes. You look at Io still curled under the fig tree. Egypt is far. The road will be cruel. But maybe this is where the ending begins. The road to Egypt is long, dry, and entirely lacking in creature comforts. There's no divine Uber service, no winged chariot pulling up with a gentle whoosh of olive-scented air. Just your feet, Io's hooves, and a trail of dust that never seems to settle. You didn't pack for this, but then again, no one ever packs for mythological cow-escorting pilgrimages. You just go. You walk, because there's nothing else to do, because staying means stings and sorrow and divine retribution with a side of lightning. Io limps beside you slower than before. Her ribs show. Her eyes look distant, less like a cow, and more like a tired soul borrowing the body of one. She tries to graze here and there, but the grass is patchy bitter and full of brambles. This journey is not about thriving. It's about enduring. The sun is relentless. Your sandals are dust-caked, your throat dry. Even Io, whose bovine constitution you've started to admire, seems to wilt beneath the weight of the sky. Then, without warning, the buzzing returns. Not many flies this time. Just one. But it's the same one. You know it. That vindictive, impossibly fast little gadfly that Hera must have gifted with eternal batteries and a personal vendetta. It darts for Io. She flinches, her entire body trembling. She begins to run, but this time she doesn't have the strength for speed. She stumbles again. You yell swatting at the air, but the gadfly doesn't care. It knows its target. Io turns circles in panic. Her tail lashes wildly. Her hooves kick up dust clouds. She runs headlong into a thicket, snapping low branches as she barrels through. You follow, heart pounding, tripping over roots, leaves, slapping your face. The fly stays close, dancing around her ears, nipping behind her horns, driving her further and further from the road. And then, with a final cry, a hollow, aching sound that no cow should be able to make, she collapses. This time she doesn't get up. You reach her side, chest heaving, arms scraped. She's trembling so hard the ground seems to hum beneath her. You cradle her head, whispering nonsense, soothing noises, half-formed words. She doesn't respond. Her eyes flicker. And then at last, the gadfly stops. No swan dive. No grand exit. It simply leaves. Maybe Hera blinked. Maybe she got distracted by a mortal swearing an oath on Mount Olympus. Or maybe, just maybe, she decided this was enough for now. You sit with Io for hours. The day grows soft around you. The sun lowers, casting long blue shadows over her fur. Eventually, she lifts her head. Her eyes meet yours. She is still here. And in a way, so are you. There's a lesser-known variation of this myth that claims Io's endurance inspired a cult, one that worshipped not power or beauty, but survival. The cow who didn't die. The woman who refused to disappear. Fringe scholars found faint inscriptions near old riverbanks in Anatolia, scratches on pottery that seemed to depict a four-legged figure with a halo of bees. Possibly Io. Possibly wishful thinking. Historians still argue whether this was a real devotion or just poetic coincidence. Either way, the symbolism endures. You patch her up as best you can. Wet cloth, a few stolen figs, whispered promises that Egypt is close, even if you're not entirely sure. The landscape begins to change. The trees thin. The soil hardens. You're nearing the edge of the familiar world, where Greek becomes foreign, and gods start wearing different crowns. You crest a low hill one morning, and see it a shimmer on the horizon. Not water, not yet, but a suggestion of it. Civilization, stone spires, the curve of a river that cuts through sand like a myth in motion. Io lifts her head. Her ears twitch. She knows. This is not home, but it could be safety. You descend slowly, careful with your steps. The land feels sacred here, though not in the Greek way. This is older, still divine, but quieter, less dramatic. No thunder, just heat and wind and time. At the Nile's edge, you and Io rest. The river flows by uncaring, and yet its presence comforts. The reeds sway. The crocodiles pretend not to notice you. And overhead, a heron drifts by like a feather made of sky. Io steps into the water cautiously. It laps at her knees. She stands there a while, looking out at the far bank, where temples rise, and voices chant in a language you don't recognize. Maybe this is the end of her wandering. Or maybe just another kind of beginning. But for now, there are no gadflies. Only the river. The Nile doesn't sparkle. It doesn't sing. It simply moves. A thick, slow procession of water, brown with silt and heavy with memory. You and Io stand at its edge, breathing in its scent, something between earth and eternity. This is a river that doesn't care about your suffering, your transformations, or even your divine drama. It just flows. Io steps deeper, hooves pressing into the muddy bottom. The water parts around her, like it recognizes her. Maybe it does. Gods may bicker, but rivers remember. And this one's seen everything. You sit on a flat rock near the bank, sandals off your toes, soaking in the cool current. The Egyptian sun feels different here, hotter, but less judgmental. You suspect the local gods are watching, but from a respectful distance. No swarms of gadflies, no all-seeing eyeballs, just quiet. Io drinks, slowly, carefully. Her posture softens. For the first time in what feels like forever, she doesn't look ready to bolt. You close your eyes, listening to the hush of water and wind, and think maybe this is where she heals. Word spreads quickly. A white cow, unusual, beautiful, untethered, has wandered into the sacred lands. The locals murmur. Priests emerge. You watch from the tall grass as a group of them approaches in flowing linen robes, their heads shaved, their eyes lined with dark kohl. They don't seem afraid. They don't try to capture her. Instead, they bow. Yes, bow. Because here in Egypt, cows aren't just livestock. They're symbols. They're sacred. They are mothers, givers of life, echoes of Hathor, the sky goddess, who wears the sun between her horns. And here is Io, radiant, foreign, glowing with divine energy, even through her exhaustion. The priests speak softly. One steps forward, palm outstretched, and offers her a garland of blue lotus. Io blinks, then bows her head just enough to accept it. You feel a lump rise in your throat. They don't ask where she came from. They don't question why her eyes look too knowing, too human. They don't demand explanations. They simply lead her gently toward a shaded courtyard, flanked by sandstone columns. You follow, cautious but welcomed. No one stops you. Inside the courtyard, there's cool water and fresh grain. Tall papyrus plants rustle like applause. The priests chant something rhythmic and deep, the syllables rolling like the river outside. It sounds ancient. It sounds right. Io lies down in the shade, not collapsed, not fleeing, resting. She breathes deeply, her sides moving in slow, steady waves. You sit beside her, your hand resting against her shoulder. Later that night, a high priest arrives, older, slower, his fingers stained with ink from writing too many scrolls. He kneels beside Io and studies her silently. Then he nods once, as if confirming a hunch only he held. She has wandered far, he says to no one in particular, but even the gods must rest. Then he turns to you. We will build a place for her. She is needed. A temple, he explains. Not to Hera, not to Zeus. To her. To the sacred cow who came from the stars through pain, through exile, through wrath, and arrived not as a victim but as a symbol. You don't respond. What would you even say? That night as the priests chant and stars burn overhead, Io sleeps peacefully, truly sleeps. No flinching, no twitching, just soft, rhythmic breaths beneath the shadow of palm trees and stars. And you, well, you watch. You think back to the olive groves, the biting flies, the impossible cloud that was meant to hide a girl, and you wonder if any of it makes sense, or if myths only pretend to. Historians still argue whether the temple built for Io was real, or if it was just a poetic flourish added centuries later. Some say it was a shrine to Hathor that absorbed Io's story, giving it a new coat of cultural paint. Others believe the Egyptians really did worship her, naming her Isis, in some versions folding her into their divine bloodline. There's no solid proof either way, just stone fragments, faded inscriptions, a cow figure carved with unnerving precision. But one thing is clear. Io's wandering ended here. In Egypt, she was no longer a fugitive. She was divine. The temple goes up faster than you expect. Not in days, nothing in Egypt happens in days, but in purposeful bursts of ritual and labor. Sandstone blocks are hauled into place beneath a sun that doesn't blink. Palm fronds wave like banners, and all the while, Io watches. She's no longer treated like a cow, not even like a goddess. It's stranger than that she's revered as something in between, a story made flesh, a miracle with 4 legs, and a gaze that pierces through centuries of disbelief. You help where you can, carrying water, fetching herbs, dodging scorpions that act like they own the courtyard. The priests nod at you now, respectful, if puzzled. You're the foreigner who arrived with the sacred beast, the cow walker. It might not be a glamorous title, but in this part of the world, it earns you a bed and shade. You'll take it. The temple walls begin to fill with paintings, not just of Io, but of her journey. You recognize the scenes, the cloud, the eyes of Argus the fly. Only now they're depicted with Egyptian symbols, blended, reinterpreted. Hera becomes a vulture goddess with sharp wings. Hermes shows up with ibis feathers. It's all familiar and yet not. You realize watching the artisans that this story is being translated not just across languages, but across belief systems. In Greece, Io was a victim. Here she is a vessel. Pain transformed into purpose. There's a moment just before sunset when the high priest brings out a gilded collar. It glints in the amber light. He lifts it gently and places it around Io's neck. The gesture isn't possessive. It's ceremonial, a sign that she belongs not to a person, not even to a god, but to the people, to the land. You sit nearby, arms wrapped around your knees, watching. And that's when it hits you. This might be the first time since all of this began that no one's trying to use her. Not Zeus who hid her, not Hera who punished her, not Hermes who rescued her on command. Here in Egypt, they aren't using her. They're listening to her, or at least honoring what they think she is. You catch her eye, just for a moment, and in that flicker of recognition, you see it. She knows. She knows that something has shifted, that she's no longer just surviving. She's becoming. In another part of the courtyard, a child approaches. Maybe 6, maybe 7. Shaved head, eyes wide. He inches closer to Io, holding out a handful of crushed barley and dates. You hold your breath. Io lowers her head, takes the offering gently. The child giggles. You exhale. The moment is simple, but like most simple moments in mythology, it's loaded. Symbolic, possibly prophetic. You can practically hear fringe historians having a field day with it. Was this the moment Io transcended bovine identity? Did the child represent the rebirth of her human self? Or was it just snack time? Historians still argue. Later that night, the priests light oil lamps along the temple's outer wall. The flames flicker, sending wobbly shadows up into the hieroglyphs, dancing cows, rivers, stars. One figure appears over and over, a white cow with a curved horn resting beneath a disk of light. That's her now. The wandering is over. The myth has settled. But what about you? You sit under the stars with a bowl of lentil stew and wonder what's your role now, that the story's changed. Genres. You're not a hero. You're not a god. You're the footnote that wandered through footnotes, a traveling companion, a human who stayed close enough to history to be forgotten into it. You're strangely okay with that. You help the priests feed her, clean the courtyard, smudge away the flies when they return rarely now and half-heartedly. Even Hera seems to be backing off. Or maybe she's moved on to tormenting someone else. There's a theory quiet whispered that Hera only relented when she saw the temple. That seeing Io worshipped without Zeus's fingerprints all over it softened her. That in this strange Egyptian twist, Hera didn't lose. She let go. You doubt it. But it's a nice thought. You sleep well for the first time in weeks. And when morning comes, the first thing you hear isn't buzzing or mooing or even prayer. It's laughter from the courtyard, where children are already gathering around the sacred cow, pointing at the golden collar, whispering legends into each other's ears. The story is alive. Not in the way the gods wrote it, but in the way people need it. You wake to a different kind of dawn, one that doesn't feel like the next chapter in a tragedy. The air is cooler, calmer, and oddly gentle, like even the sun has decided to be polite this morning. Io is already awake, standing beneath the acacia tree in the temple courtyard, her eyes watching the horizon, as if expecting someone. Maybe she's expecting herself. The temple is alive. The walls pulse with life-painted sung whispered into. Each day more people come. Pilgrims, curious travelers, a few nobles in golden sandals with faces carved by politics. But no one dares touch her. They leave offerings, instead pomegranates, amulets, carved figurines shaped like cows, women's stars. You've stopped correcting them, because who Io was hardly matters anymore. What she means now has taken on a life of its own. In this place, she's something else entirely. Some say she's Hathor reborn. Others whisper she's a goddess from a far-off land sent to cleanse the Nile. A few say she's Isis in disguise. One especially eccentric scribe claims she's a cursed star fallen to earth in bovine form to teach mankind humility. You just smile and let them guess. But it raises a strange thought. What happens when a mortal becomes myth and then becomes divine? Historians still debate this moment in the Io story, whether she remained a sacred beast until her death, or whether she transformed once more into a full-fledged goddess. Some inscriptions from later dynasties refer to a deity named Io Isa, a fusion of Greek and Egyptian reverence, her name etched beside crescent moons and solar disks. No one agrees where the mortal ends and the immortal begins. But you suspect even Io doesn't know. One day a priestess arrives. Unlike the others, she doesn't bow. She approaches slowly, respectfully, eyes level, and then she speaks, not to the crowd, to Io, in the old Greek tongue. You were human once. Io flinches, just slightly, but it's there. The priestess continues. They think you're something else now, and maybe you are, But you don't have to forget. You don't have to erase it. The other priests shift uncomfortably. A few look to the high priest who does nothing. The woman steps closer. We can remember you as both the woman and the symbol. That's what makes you sacred. Not that you were born a goddess, but that you survived becoming one. Io lowers her head slowly until her brow touches the woman's shoulder. It's the closest thing to an embrace she's given since this began. That night, something changes. The temple lamps burn longer. The stars feel nearer. And Io, though still in her four-legged form, moves differently. There's grace there now. Yes, but also intention. She doesn't just endure. She acts. She leads children gently toward the fig trees. She dips her horn beneath the sacred fountain, so the water spills where the sick gather. You begin to notice small things. She no longer flinches at shadows. She chooses where she sleeps, instead of collapsing. She walks not behind you, but beside you. There's an open scholarly debate around this part of the myth. Some argue that Io was eventually turned back into a woman by Zeus or Hera as a form of divine mercy. Others claim she simply transcended her body, entirely became spirit symbol avatar. Still others suggest she never returned to her old self, because that self was never coming back. And maybe that's the point. Io doesn't need to be rescued anymore. She doesn't need Zeus to intervene, or Hermes to whisper lullabies. She doesn't need Hera's forgiveness. She has rewritten herself, from cow to goddess, from priestess to parable. You sit with her in the early morning light temple bells, ringing in the distance. She watches the sun rise with calm certainty, as if it belongs to her. Maybe it does. In Egypt, stories don't end. They get built into walls, buried in tombs, carried on the backs of beetles and the tips of pyramid shadows. And now, Io's story is one of them. Her temple becomes part of the sacred map, known by sailors, chanted by farmers, drawn in charcoal by passing scribes. She is no longer a secret shame, a divine mistake turned mooing footnote. She is remembered. Meanwhile, far above the dust, above the Nile, above even the stories carved into stone, Mount Olympus broods in silence. The clouds coil like serpents around its jagged edges, thick with divine unease. Hera is not sleeping. She hasn't slept properly since the day Hermes played his lullaby and Argus fell. Since Io disappeared into the land of other gods. Since her carefully layered punishment unraveled thread by thread. And now, temples. Temples to Io. She walks the halls of Olympus with sandals that echo like gongs. Her robe sways like storm clouds caught in a breeze, and every servant, mortal or immortal, finds a reason to vanish when she passes. No one dares speak her name. Not Hera's, Io's. But Olympus whispers anyway. You feel it down below, even across the sea, even in the warmth of Egypt's breeze. A subtle prickling in the air, like being watched by something vast and disappointed. You look toward the horizon, often now expecting to see thunderheads gathering where they don't belong. Back in the divine realm, Hera paces past golden columns and smoking braziers. She sits by her favorite window and watches the world she has no full control over. It rankles. That girl, no, that cow, was supposed to vanish. She was supposed to be a footnote in Zeus's endless parade of flings. Another cautionary tale. Instead, she's become something sacred, without Hera's permission, without Zeus's. Just on her own. Hera bites down on a fig. It bursts between her teeth like a small betrayal. The thing is, Hera's not entirely wrong to be annoyed. She's not just the goddess of marriage, she's the goddess of order, of vows, of structure, of who belongs where. When stories deviate from their divine outlines, they threaten the whole system. And Io's story has deviated spectacularly. But here's the twist. Hera doesn't send more flies. She doesn't dispatch another Argus. She doesn't demand the temple be leveled or that Egypt suffer under drought or plague. Instead, she watches. And in a way that's even more unsettling, because Hera doesn't always punish. Sometimes she waits. Historians still argue whether Hera eventually came to respect Io. Some texts hint that she did, that Io's quiet endurance, her refusal to break, reminded Hera of herself. That beneath the anger, there was a grudging admiration. Fringe theories go even further. One obscure account claims Hera appeared in Egypt, in disguise entering the temple not as a goddess, but as a veiled traveler. That she stood before Io, face unreadable, and offered a single olive branch. Not as apology, not even as peace, just recognition. The story ends there. It doesn't say whether Io accepted the branch. You find yourself thinking about that as you sweep the temple courtyard, brushing away sand from the newly carved altar steps. Above you, doves circle lazily. Below, the chants begin again, low, melodic, reverent. Inside the sanctuary, priests light incense. The smoke coils like memory. On the walls, the paintings are evolving. Where once Io was depicted as a cow cowering from Argus, now she's shown walking confidently beside him, both of them equal in size, eyes level, no chains. You ask one of the scribes why the image changed. Because the story changed, he replies. Or maybe we finally listened to it properly. Outside, Io moves among her people. She doesn't speak, but her presence is enough. She's no longer shrinking from attention, no longer haunted by the buzzing that once chased her across continents. She walks slowly, her golden collar gleaming, her gaze calm. And one day, the people begin calling her by a new name. They stop saying Io. They say, the Lady of the Horizon, the White One, she who walked through storms. The names multiply, and none of them belong to Zeus or Hera or even Hermes. They belong only to her. You wonder if the gods are still watching, if Hera is still watching. You suspect she is. But she no longer sends vengeance. She sends silence. And somehow that's more powerful, because Olympus has many gods. Too many. All stomping around with their grudges and rules and lightning bolts. But Io just walked away from them, and still came out divine. You don't see him arrive, not at first. There's no golden chariot, no crash of thunder announcing his presence. Just a breeze too cool for the desert, and the faint scent of laurel and wet marble. Zeus. You spot him one morning cloaked and hooded, standing at the edge of the courtyard, like a very poorly disguised tourist. The priests don't recognize him. Why would they? He doesn't look like a god right now. He looks like a man who's aged in all the ways he never expected, quiet, weathered, almost hesitant. He watches Io, not with the old desire that started all this chaos, not with pride either, just a kind of quiet, stunned reverence, like someone staring at something they built by accident, which grew into something far greater than they ever intended. He doesn't approach her. Instead, he turns to you. Does she remember, he asks. You stare at him. Of all the questions, that's the one she remembers everything. Every step, every sting, every shadow that followed her across land and sea. Of course she remembers. She forgives you, say, more confident than you feel. Zeus nods. That's not the same as forgetting. No, you reply. It's not. You expect him to explain himself, to tell you he never meant harm, that he only wanted to protect her hide, her keep her safe from Hera's wrath. But he doesn't. Maybe even he knows it wouldn't matter. Instead, he reaches into his cloak and pulls out a small object, smooth, rounded, polished white stone with golden inscriptions etched into it. You recognize the script. Olympian. Ancient. The kind only gods use when they're writing to each other. A god letter. He hands it to you. Give this to her, if she chooses. Then he's gone. No parting word, no flash of light. Just empty space where he stood. You sit under the palm trees with the stone in your hand. It's warm, heavier than it looks. You debate what to do. Later, you approach Io. She's resting beneath the temple's east pillar, a garland of reeds draped around her neck, like a lazy halo. Her eyes flick to the stone. She sees it before you even speak. You hold it out. She doesn't move. You kneel and place it gently on the ground. She stares at it for a long time. Maybe minutes. Maybe lifetimes. Then with one careful motion, she places a hoof on it. The stone cracks down the center with a sound like dry thunder splitting the inscriptions into unreadable fragments. Well, that's her answer. You don't bring it up again. But there's something in her eyes that night, something deeper than peace. It's not vindication, not even closure, just clarity. The kind that comes from choosing silence over explanation. People often imagine Zeus as unstoppable, unshakable. But Io, she's the one who walked from temple to wilderness to temple again, and never begged for a return. She didn't ask to be changed back. She didn't ask for mercy. She just kept walking. You think about that as you help the younger priests repaint the temple murals. The new panel they're adding. It's different. No cloud, no cow, no chained wrists, just a woman, tall, crowned eyes forward, standing in a field of stars, and next to her, a broken tablet. The symbolism is subtle, quietly savage. Fringe scholars might argue one day that this was the point where her myth split from Olympus entirely, that from here on, her story becomes something else no longer beholden to the whims of the 12. Mainstream historians might scoff, but they'll write it down all the same. Meanwhile, back in Greece, a curious thing begins to happen. Statues appear not just of Zeus and Hera and Athena, but of a nameless woman with a sun disk over her head and a gentle cow at her side. People start calling her by borrowed names, Isis, Hathor, Io. The lines blur. The stories tangle. And somewhere in that tangle she survives. You start hearing about letters, pilgrims who left messages scratched into temple walls, little offerings sealed in clay jars. Not prayers exactly, just conversations. One says, "You walked farther than I thought I could. Thank you." Another reads, "They tried to break me, but I kept going, like you." And on one especially worn piece of parchment barely legible under the smudge of time he wrote, "I didn't answer. You think she'd like that one, because this was never about Zeus, or Hera, or even Olympus. This was always about what happens after the chase, after the curse, after the apologies that come too late. You walk the temple halls that night, listening to the soft sound of breathing, the priests, the pilgrims, the sacred animals curled in straw-lined corners. And at the heart of it all, Io, sleeping beneath the open sky, no chains, no watchers, no thunder, just stars. The sun rises like it always does too early, too bright. But now it feels less like a judgment, and more like a ritual. You rise with it brushing sleep from your eyes as you make your way toward the courtyard. There beneath a broad canopy of woven reeds, Io stands in full view of her followers. She's not in procession. There's no ceremony today. She's just there. And yet they gather anyway. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds now, come every morning to glimpse her, to whisper their dreams, to kneel not in fear, but in gratitude. You watch from the shade arms crossed, still a little baffled by how far this has come. From Argos to Egypt, from cloud to cow to whatever she is now. No one calls her Io anymore. She has a dozen new names depending on the tongue. Mistwalker, she who mourned in motion, the first cow of dawn. One name popular among travelers simply calls her the Witness, because she saw everything and survived. You pass through the temple halls, where scribes are busy at their clay tablets. You pause to read a few lines as they dry in the morning air. The gods created storms, but she taught us how to walk through them. You've read worse scripture. Down by the riverbank, a small altar has sprung up, not built by priests, but by locals, mothers, farmers, boatmen. Bits of cloth hang from the branches of nearby trees. Simple offerings, hopes tied with string, and always, always, the carved shape of a woman and a cow standing side by side. You overhear a guide explaining the story to a new group of pilgrims. He gestures with sweeping arms. Once she was a girl, then a cloud, then a cow, now a goddess. It's not wrong, you think, just abbreviated. Still, it gets the job done. And it's not just Egypt. News travels. Traders from Mycenae speak of a temple where the Nile meets the sky, a place where no one judges you for your scars, especially the ones you didn't choose. Back in Greece, a few bold poets start slipping her name into hymns. Carefully, quietly, because Hera still listens. But maybe, just maybe, she listens with different ears now. There's an old story almost forgotten about Hera's first temple in Samos. Before the myths, before Zeus, just Hera, alone beside a river, tired, building something. Some say she wasn't born divine, that she had to become Hera, just as Io became something new. If that's true, maybe that's why Hera let the silence stand. Maybe she recognized a piece of herself in Io's walk through ruin. Or maybe she just got bored. We'll never know. Historians still argue whether Hera's silence was mercy, apathy, or surrender. Either way, the result is the same. No flies, no storms, no divine tantrums, just time and temples. One day, a delegation arrives from Delphi Greeks, wrapped in formal chitons bearing scrolls and laurel crowns. They approach with ceremony bows precise and rehearsed. We come to offer recognition, their leader says, from the Hellenes. You glance at Io. She doesn't move. The high priest steps forward. She does not require recognition, he replies gently. She is. It's a line that finds its way onto coins within the year. Back in the temple, another fresco is unveiled. It shows a path, not a straight one, but winding, looping with storms and flies and eyes etched into the margins. And at the center, a woman in white, neither cow nor goddess, but something between. It's the most accurate depiction yet. You walk with her again that evening, just the two of you. The stars blink overhead, lazy and content. You pass the edge of the temple grounds, where the land dips into a quiet grove of fig trees. She pauses beside one, sniffs the bark, and you remember the fig tree near Argos, where she once collapsed, chased and stung and exhausted. Now she simply rests. You sit beside her. The air is warm, the silence soft. You think about everything she's been through, everything you've witnessed, and for the first time, you feel that rarest of sensations in myth, peace. Not victory, Not transformation, just stillness. A life, however strange, allowed to be lived without interference. You wonder how long it will last, if another story will rise to chase this one down, if memory will twist it into something else, something cleaner, more palatable. Probably. But tonight, the truth still breathes. A woman, a journey, a name that changed, and you are part of it now, not because you did anything heroic, but because you stayed and watched. You don't remember exactly when it happened, when the temple stopped being a place about Io and started becoming a place because of her. The shift was gradual, like sunlight creeping across a tiled floor. One day, she was the reason pilgrims came. The next, she was simply part of the landscape, ever present, woven into the rhythm of daily life, like water or wind. She walks through the courtyards now without accompaniment. No priest flanking her with ceremonial fans. No guards. Just her, and the sound of her hooves on smooth stone. You sit beneath the eaves sipping from a clay cup filled with something sweet and herbal, and you watch her make her slow rounds. Children wave. Old women bow. Occasionally, someone leaves a wreath at her feet. She never reacts. Not with surprise, not with pride. She just pauses, acknowledges, continues. This, you realize, is what it looks like when a myth settles. She doesn't perform godhood. She simply exists. As if the story no longer needs to be told, it only needs to be felt. The temple has expanded again. New columns. A second courtyard. The walls are beginning to depict events after the transformation, after the cow, after Egypt. Scenes with symbols no one quite understands. A hand reaching from a star. A cow giving birth to a full-grown woman. Eyes drawn as galaxies, not ornaments. The high priests say it's prophecy. You think it might just be metaphor. Historians still argue over this part, whether Io ever physically transformed back into human form. Some versions claim she became fully divine, ascending into the heavens as a star goddess. Others say she returned to Greece, gave birth to heroes, and her lineage became royal. Still others insist she died as a cow, buried beneath a temple that now lies in ruins. But those are endings, and endings never sit well in myths like these, because Io doesn't feel like a story that ends. She feels like one that continues, and so you stay. You sweep the steps, you light the lamps, you mend the tapestries. You guide the newer pilgrims who ask you what the journey means. You tell them bits and pieces, enough to get them curious. But you always end with, "You'll understand when you walk beside her," because that's the real miracle, not the survival, not the temple, not the cow-turned-deity transformation. It's that someone kept going. You recall distantly how it all began. A woman, a temple, a cloud, a lie, a cow, and then a walk that became a flight, that became a pilgrimage, that became a legend, and now something more. Tonight you sit by the reflecting pool as dusk drapes itself over the columns. The water flickers orange and violet. Io stands across from you, lit by the last breath of sunlight. She gazes into the water, not at her reflection, but at the ripples, like she's remembering something, or letting it go. You stay quiet, because some things are too sacred for words. She turns slowly, walks toward her quarters. The breeze follows. And you, after a long moment, follow too. You've seen gods rise and fall, but you've only seen one become. Not in fire, not in war, but in the simple act of surviving and walking and refusing to disappear. The temple is quiet now. The lamps flicker low, casting long, lazy shadows on the stone. Somewhere nearby, A bird settles into its perch. The wind drifts through the open arches with the soft hush of pages turning. You lie on a woven mat near the east wall, where the newest mural still smells faintly of ochre and lime. Above you, the stars blink into place slow and steady, each one a silent witness, each one a point of light stitched into the dark fabric of myth. Io is already asleep. You can hear the even rhythm of her breath, the gentle rustle when she shifts her weight. Even in rest, she seems to watch without watching, as though part of her never stopped walking. You close your eyes. The world feels lighter than it did when you arrived. Not fixed, not perfect, but softer, less cruel. You breathe in the scent of fig leaves, distant incense, warm stone, and you exhale slowly, letting go of everything except this moment, this stretch of stillness at the end of a very long journey. No buzzing flies, no thunder overhead, just the sound of sleep, the memory of a path walked in pain and dignity, and the knowledge that even the strangest, saddest stories can grow quiet, can become sacred, can find peace. Rest now, wanderer. There are no more eyes watching, no more clouds to hide in, just stars and breath, and the slow, safe turning of the world.